one. Yes, last week was orientation week. This is week one. Remember, we get you for 5 weeks. So this is actually, I know it's your second week, but this is only week one. So I've been watching the gathering activity and everything, and okay, it looks like most of the people have given me some candy for my candy dish there. Good, okay. I'm going to go ahead and clear out those, put those things in my candy dish. There we go. Hey, I'm looking at the gathering activity. I'm looking at some of this experience that we've got right here, and people talking about currently supervisors on B1s and B-52 experience, and prior officers and prior enlisted, and some individuals are Army Reserve now, but also an Air Force civilian. So that's pretty unique. And James says he's the first sergeant. A little bit different in the Air Force and versus the Army on a first sergeant. Still deal with the discipline, right, James? But yours is a rank, whereas in the Air Force it's just a position. All right, let's see. Continuing on down right there. Got some friends in class. I see they're talking to each other here in the chat pod and that. All right. So anyway, the idea is remember all of our courses, whether it's this course or the other course that I teach for civilian to supervised Air Force military, called the Military Personnel Management course. The idea is we've got some sort of supervisory experience, even if it's really nothing, to share. We get those experiences. So, whether you've been on a work detail even, and you've had 3 or 4 people with you on that work detail, and you're in charge of the work detail, hey, guess what? That's supervisory experience. But the idea is trying to take that little bit of supervisory experience, or a lot of supervisory experience, that you may have, and equate it and try to build it upon your own experiences to help yourself be that wonderful supervisor for your civilian subordinates when it comes to this particular class. All right. Hey, so if you remember correctly, right, we talked last week during the orientation about target population and that. And so, why are you here and whatever the case is. But I'm going to piggyback on that gathering activity and do our first poll pod for the day. We're going to have 3. We should have 3 of these today. All right. So here's your first poll pod for the day. I put it right in the middle of your slide. So if you could take your device or your finger, whatever you've got available to you for your particular computer or device that you're on. But how long have you supervised Air Force civilians? All right, since that's what this course is all about, supervising Air Force civilians. So we've got your options are 0 to 90 days, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12, 1 to 3, or 3 to plus, or 3 years or more. So we got. Now, the reason we put this up, remember last week you talked about, these courses were required by air staff based on congressional requirements and so on. And it used to be, if I didn't mention it last week, I'll mention it now. It used to be that when an individual was put in a supervisory position, they were required to have their supervisory training within 6 months of being assigned that position. Well, last year, Air Force changed that requirement when they started development of these new courses, and pushed it out to a year because a lot of people weren't meeting the requirements because there were just more people than quotas available. So they actually pushed it from 6 months to a year. So if I was to take that little requirement there of up to a year, that would mean our target population for this course, and looking at the numbers right there, so that'd be 0 to 90 all the way up to 6 to 12. That is 16 folks that are actually in the target window for this course, and that's great. We also have 5 individuals that have more than 1 year of experience. We got 2 within 3, and then 3 that are 3 or more, okay, and supervising Air Force civilians. And it's wonderful that we've got these experienced individuals in class because when we do scenarios in the class. Now, normally, the way the courses are set up, hang on, I have someone private chatting me, just a moment. Okay. The way you get a green check mark, okay? The little guy that was with his hand up like that right above my screen, okay, right above my webcam. You see a little guy with his hand up like that. There's a little arrow right next to the guy. You click on the little arrow, and then you got your little options. Now, if you're on a device, you may not have all those options. So then you just type something in the chat pod or something. All right, cool. All right, so anyway, hang on, got someone private chatting me again. Okay, you're welcome. All right, so anyway, but the idea is the course is set up to try and put you into groups to work on different scenarios. Gene, if you lost audio, then I'm still on the telephone. So, and I can hear people dialing in, which means I am still live on the telephone. So, but if you've lost audio here, you may need to call in on the audio. So, can't hear me. Hang on, let me type that in. Can't hear me. Call in. There we go. Oh, thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Matthew must be on the telephone as well. Anyway, but the idea is we try and break you into groups at different points during the courses. However, based on people having to use devices and the iffiness of what's been going on over the past few weeks, I've been playing it safe than sorry. So I'm actually trying to do at least this first week, rather than break you into groups later today here in the classroom. We'll actually work on those scenarios as a group. And we'll brainstorm together is what we'll do today. We'll see how it works next week in week 3, and whether I actually break you into groups here in the classroom or not. But today, we're going to play safe than sorry. We'll just work on everything together. But we got these 5 individuals who have a lot of experience, more than a year of supervisory experience. So hopefully when it comes to getting opinions and, what might we do in this case, whatever it is, hopefully those of y'all who are in those, now we've got 6 folks. Oh, now we're back down to 5. Those 5 folks really the ones who will be chiming in the most to share their experience with everyone here in the class, we hope. All right. Let me go ahead, and I see Rebecca's got a microphone enabled. Let me disable Rebecca's microphone just a moment. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and clear out the green X's, green check marks as well. There we go. All right, let's get going on this course here. Let's get going today. Let's see what we got to do. All right. So as you see up there, let me hit that wrong button right there. As you see in our overview slide, and again, it matches what says up there in the roadmap. Remember, I call the overview pod a roadmap, so it tells us where we're going. Right? We'll be looking at the hiring processes today. Of course, this sets the table. Okay, thanks, Jessica. See you later. We'll be talking about the 4 steps in the hiring process, getting into some basics when it comes to interviewing and selecting, talking about some things to try and stay away from, basically to keep yourself out of trouble. And also we'll talk about the onboarding process. That individual has been hired, and here they come, and we're trying to make sure that is a good experience for everyone involved. We hope, right? And of course, if you look at the roadmap over there, we have our objectives, talking about comprehending and receiving the process, procedures, critical principles and policies for basic affirmative employment, and staffing for civilian personnel management. Okay, so now remember what we're going to be talking about here is general Air Force rules and guidelines and stuff like that. You have local subject matter experts out there at each of your installations called your civilian personnel office. You may have different requirements, what we may talk about in here and what you may read in Canvas, because there's a lot of information on Canvas and on this areas as well. Like I said, when we teach, we talk. If you look at an umbrella, we're the umbrella. We're at the top up here. We talk Air Force generalities. It's all those things that fall under the umbrella. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to do that, and so on. A lot of times that comes down to your local policies, whether it's your squadron, your group, your installation, or it could be your MAGCOM policies. I know what I've been seeing on the Air Force websites and that there are different hiring programs that are being tested at different locations throughout the Air Force, such as AFRL's got one. I think AFMC's got one. So, these are things that, if you hear about these new programs that are being tested and so on, remember it's only pertaining to your particular areas, not across the Air Force possibly. So, so we try and keep our courses as general as possible, knowing who our target populations are, right? So anyway, We've got a lot of people that are actually, remember we talked in Canvas when I took you in there during the orientation, and I mentioned the discussion boards. I said those were optional, but it's a way for people to ask questions back and forth and ask us questions, whatever. I've been seeing some great comments in the discussion board area where people are talking to each other. I even made a comment out there talking about the differences in civilians and military when it comes to the nuances of social media, because someone had gone into the discussion board area and was talking about harassment, talking about during week one, talking about harassment and so on. So I was making comments out there about how civilians are different when it comes to on social media versus your Air Force, military are totally different. Like I said, we've got some people here in Europe, here at the Army installation, that have actually been discharged over the past couple of years due to making disparaging remarks on social media, military that is, because that doesn't pertain to civilians, because that's considered harassment and so on. So the military is taken very, very serious on that social media stuff. We said on AFN, we don't get commercials over here in Europe on AFN. We get public service announcements, and that's something they've really been pushing a lot through AFN and everything, and through the Air Force JAG Corps and everything, talking about your military folks and the use of social media and that, and how it can really, really, really get them in trouble because they're military 24/7, whether they're in uniform or not. Again, like I said, a little bit different on the civilian side of the house. The civilians have more rights and privileges when it comes to things like that. Of course, no one should harass or disparage anybody through any forum, right? It should be zero tolerance no matter what. But a little bit difference because, the civilians, they have their rules and requirements, whereas the military, they have the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they violate that. That's court-martialed offenses and everything possibly. So anyway, so great stuff that's hitting out there on the discussion board area. If you haven't been out there yet, and when you're going through your modules, weekly, week 1, week 2, and so on, you can always click on as you're going through your readings and that. You're going through Canvas. You'll come up to the one that says discussion, and as soon as you click on discussion, you can just scroll down and see what people have to say on there, and feel free to to comment back to them if you so desire. It's not required. It's not like a college course where you have to respond to different people and everything. We don't play that, right? But it's just a way to share a lot of information in that. Okay. Hey, I got a lot of I got some stuff in the file share for you if you want to download them. Again, not required. You've already got the slides. Of course, I have the slides over there for you, and the slides that are here on the screen. But as you know, I emailed the slides to everybody. They went out yesterday, and as a matter of fact, I remember they actually came from my Gmail because for some reason the webmail was really, really messing up. Webmail was down for us all weekend. I couldn't get into webmail at all this weekend. It kept saying it was a bad URL. Finally, it came up on Monday, but I couldn't upload any attachments. It would just sit there and look at me. So I ended up sending out your invite to this today, and then let you know that I was going to send you the slides via my Gmail account. So you should have them already. The other things I have over there for you are some of the things that we'll talk about today. And again, all those file shares over there, if they're not required for you to download, they're just little tidbits. Feel free, your choice. But the different things that I have over there for you pertain to week 1. So as I said, like I like to do is since I'm very a CDO, and if I didn't explain what CDO is, that's OCD, but it's in the right order, okay? But so I like to click on the word name in the file share and put my stuff in alphabetical order. So all the things that have the acronym CPS in front of it, again, that stands for Civilian Personnel Section. These are a bunch of messages that came out of AFPC down at Randolph. So I got one of the first one I have on there. It's called DoD Temporary Direct Hiring Authority for certain positions. It actually has 3 attachments with it. That's about a meg long, meg big altogether. I've got one over there called Employing Retired Members after the retired have been recalled to active duty. What that's about is, where we've got that 180-day requirement for an individual once they get out of the military. You have to wait 180 days unless they get a waiver. to actually be hired. Well, some individuals are actually been a GS employee and they're being rehired as a military person for months or a year or whatever it is. And then once that is over, they're going back to their GS job, being rehired again. Well, they've already did that 180. They don't have to do that 180-day thing again. Already did that, all right? But that little message is over there for you. Let's see, and of course, we've got referral cert timeline for selecting officials, and we know that the goal is 80 days, but we know that 80 days is pushing it, all right? We all know. Okay. If anyone was to type in right now and they said 80 days, it takes us 120 to get our stuff, or 140, that would not surprise me one bit, okay? We all know that the goal is 80 days, but rarely is the 80 days working. So that's one reason why some of the MAGCOMs are doing some test programs to try and do some different, to try and speed up that process of that, all right? But anyway, so we got that timeline over there. We got another one over there. I'll skip by that one. I'll go on. There's another one called USA Hire FAQs and Cutoff Scores. If you haven't heard about this, when people are going out there and applying for jobs through USA Jobs, there are certain career areas that now require individuals to take assessments through USA Jobs before their stuff is actually referred and stuff like that. So if you are in one of those particular career areas and you want to know, hey, I'm in one of those career areas, our people have to go through that USA Hire assessment thing. There's actually an item over there called the cutoff scores. In other words, what would be the minimum score in that? It's really nice to know. Of course, there's one over there called VOW, which stands for Veterans Opportunity to Work and the 180-day waiver process. I already mentioned that a little bit. But the other one, little one I want to talk about just for a moment, is the one that's called Tax Reform Impact DoD Civilian Moves. And this could actually impact your ability, not so much, it really impacts the people here in Europe, more so than the people in the States, but definitely here in Europe. But it could impact you as well when it comes to hiring folks. Because if you haven't heard yet, you should have heard already through your civilian personnel folks, all these PCS moves that people take, military and civilians and that. Well, the idea is, a lot of these PCS moves are basically tax-free. Well, not anymore, okay? When President Trump signed the tax law changes in 2018, it brought that new tax reform in, and now individuals civilians who PCS from one base to another base, whether they're going into having their household goods moved, whether they're moving into billeting or whatever it is, all those tax-free things, not anymore. Now they're all taxable, and could end up having to claim it on their income taxes and so on. Now I know there's programs out there like RETA where an individual can apply for a little bit of help and stuff like that. But even that's taxable as well. So that tax reform that President Trump signed and went into effect, signed it in 2018. It's having a huge impact on hiring civilians, and whether the individual is new to the civilian world as a GS employee, or the individuals at one installation and they want to PCS to another installation. I had an individual type in the last class, granted this is an overseas, that his civilians were paying upwards of $30,000 out of their own pocket to PCS, right? So because of these new tax laws and everything. So like I said, it's very, very important information. So if you haven't heard about this yet, and if you're looking at hiring civilians, it's something you definitely want to check out with your local civilian personnel office, because it can impact your ability to hire who you're trying to hire. Some people may say, sorry, I'm not going. All right. Oh, thank you. You're going to hire me. That's how much it's going to cost me? Nope. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. All right. And so on. Anyway, so I got those handouts for you over there. Feel free to download them if you like. I see I got people coming and going here in the chat room again. Do apologize if you are getting knocked out of Adobe Connect. Remember, it's not Adobe Connect. It's the local bandwidth. It's the installation where you're at. It's pushing back on Adobe Connect, and so that way, whether it's your IP addresses, your firewalls, or whatever. And I do apologize for that. And so that's why I said I hope things work out for you. I wish they would. Like I said, if it was Adobe Connect, I'd be getting kicked out too. All right, hey Gene, do me a favor. Give me a green check mark because I see you're signed in twice. You may be getting. I'm going to go ahead and clear out your first one there, Gene, because if not, you're probably getting an echo. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that first one out. There we go. All right, see if I get anyone else signed in twice. It's not on a device. Nope. Okay, Gene, gotcha, Gene. Thank you. All right. All right, so let's get going with this. Let's get going with this. Let's get into this. Well, I just spent 20 minutes talking about the introduction and everything. Let's get into this. I'm talking about this hiring process, all right? The hiring process. So like I said, we've got new processes out there that are being tested, just like I said, AFMC, AFRL, and so on. So if you got any questions at all when it comes to specific things you want to get with your local subject matter experts, your civilian personnel office, all right? Now I'm going to put a question down in the chat pod for you. The first question, remember I always do my questions in blue. So here we go. First question. This will give me a green check mark or a red X. Green, yes. Red, no. Have you ever been involved in the hiring process? Green, yes. Red, no. Ever been involved in the hiring process? Green, yes. Red, no. All right. So we got a nice little holiday candy dish there. I got some greens. I got some reds, whatever the case is. What if I told you that that's actually a sort of a trick question? Everybody should be green. So if I said everybody should be green, why would I come to that summation? Why do you think, type in the chat pod for me, why do you think I said I would think that everybody should be green? Should have no reds over there. Why do you think that? All right? And go ahead and clear out that little candy dish. Greens and reds. Why would everyone have been green? Let's see what you got. Exactly correct. Yeah, because maybe you weren't a hiring authority, but you may have been on the other side of the table. All y'all were hired. Even if you're military, you were hired. You know, you had to apply to be in the Air Force. They accepted you. You had to raise your hand, take the oath, and so on. But if you're a civilian employee, of course, you were hired as well. So, and the reason I bring that up is because, you may not have thought about that. So, okay, I have been involved in the hiring process before. So whether you've been a hiring authority or not, being involved in the process will help you when it comes time to actually doing that particular stuff because you're on the other side of the table. Like I've always said, you can learn as much from a bad supervisor as you can a good supervisor. Because, of course, the good ones, you learn what to do. And from the bad ones, you learn what not to do. Well, the same thing in the hiring process. You know, if you weren't a hiring authority, but you were being hired, if it was a positive experience, all right, you know that you can take that forward when you become on the hiring side of the house. But if it was a bad experience, left a bad taste in your mouth, you would have done this different, you would have done that different. Okay, when you become a hiring person, there's your experiences right there as well. So exactly correct. All y'all have been hired. Okay, so I sort of hinted at the next poll pot I'm going to bring up to you, all right? So since we talked about the hiring process, how many of y'all have been a hiring official before? It doesn't have to be, here in the Air Force, all right? You've been a hiring official. You have been the one that says, I'm hiring that person right there, right? And so it could be, so we've got some yeses, we've got some no's. We got about 65% no's and about 35% yeses. All right, good. So let me bring over another poll pod for you since I did that one, talking about the hiring official. So let me ask you this one here, right? So this one here says, how many of y'all have ever participated in a hiring panel? In other words, there have been 2 or 3 of you sitting there and you're interviewing the individuals. You know, whether you're doing it through face-to-face interviews, telephone interviews, maybe you're doing it as a paper interview type stuff. You don't have anyone sitting in front of you. You're looking at their resumes or whatever, but you were part of a team that were looking, and maybe you weren't actually the hiring person. Maybe you were racking and stacking people for the hiring authority and whatever it is. So how many of you have been involved in some sort of hiring interview panel? So we've got about 13 folks that have said, 14 folks that have said yes in some fashion. We've got 8 people that have said no. And no one's in the process right now, and no one's going to be doing it pretty soon. Okay. So it looks like we've got 14 total yeses and 8 no's. All right. Well, that gives you an idea of the things we're going to be talking about today. All right. So let's get into this hiring process then. All right. So let me ask you a personal question because I have the words, do you believe in it? Let's let you know that there's no right or wrong answer here. So in the chat pod, if you'll type for me, what do you believe is the most important factor when it comes to the hiring process? What do you think it is? Type that in the chat box. What do you think is the most important factor when it comes to hiring people? All right. Matthew says speed. I want to get that person hired and get them here now. All right. Good, Matthew. What else we got? Visual. Oh, that's different. I don't think I've ever had the good fit for the organization. Right. You want to hire the right person, not just someone to fill a seat. Right. Attitude, good, clear expectations, length of time on the job, attitude, knowing what you're looking for. Hey, what's your objective? Good. Right, Chad, a good fit. Got other people typing in transparency. Yeah, we want to be as transparent as possible, especially if we happen to get questions later, if we get a grievance filed because someone wasn't happy that they didn't get hired. Trust me, if you haven't had one of those yet, you'll get one at some point probably. Right employee for the job, the qualifications, fit and experience, and William said experience as well. Right, okay. Yeah, so the communication and skills. Are they good communicators? What are their skills and whatever? Right, and their attitude as well, because we want to make sure that they fit in with the team. Good, okay. So like I said, there was no set answer to that. It's just what you thought right here. So when it comes to the steps in the hiring process, of course, your first step is always planning. No matter what, whether we're going to take a trip, whether we're going to do some training, no matter what we're going to do, we want to plan, because if we don't plan, we could go down a path we don't plan to go down. Maybe we're not looking at the right things. Maybe our strategic plan has changed, but we haven't updated all the documents and everything. Maybe this person that we were going to hire, maybe the qualifications for the job change, so maybe we have to adjust that way as well. So, you kind of look at your requirements, look at your plans, make sure that everything still meets your organizational needs. Then once you do that, then you need to try and find out, okay, where am I going to get where am I going to be able to get my people from? I see our local area right here. I know what I got. I have an idea of what I'll have to draw from. Does it look like I'll be able to hire locally, or will I have to go outside somewhere? In other words, we're trying to identify our talent requirements and look at our local labor market as well, right? But when it comes to all this stuff right here, like I said earlier at the very beginning, your local subject matter expert is that staffing specialist there at your civilian personnel office. They are there to help basically hold your hand and guide you through the entire process of starting the hiring, getting all your paperwork together, all the way to the end when you get that person hired and we're getting them onboarded and everything, and then getting them in processed and all that as well. They are there to help you. So another question down in the chat pod. This will be a green yes, red no. Green yes, red no. All right. Have you had any contact with your staffing specialist yet? All right. Have you had any contact with your staffing specialist? All right, so those of y'all who are giving me the greens, all right, so I'm going to have a follow-up question for you all. Let me put that in the chat pod for you. So if you'll put your answer in the chat pod for me, all right? If so, those of y'all who give me the green, looks like I got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 greens. Now, what are some of the things that they helped you with? And I'm having you type this in so those people who gave the red will say, oh, if I have that issue and I need help with my staffing specialist, these are some of the things that they can help me with. So those of y'all who gave the green M&M, those green check marks, please type in the chat pod for me. So if you've had some contact with your staffing specialist, what have they helped you with? So here we go. Matthew typed in job series coding to degree program mapping in some exceptional cases. Okay. Clarifications on the questionnaires. Good. Jason typed in special cases and circumstances. Chad just has some general questions regarding personnel questions. Okay. And then Landa said legal wording for responses. Yeah, they are the subject matter experts. As I like to say, use and abuse them. That's what they're there for. And actually, they enjoy it because the more that they help you, the more it's actually making their job easier as well. Rebecca typed in qualifications. All right, good. All right. So let me ask you another question. We're asking all kinds of questions today. Like I said, this is a participative course. So my next question in the chat pod for you is think back to when you were going to be that first civilian. So this question here is for the civilians in the house, all right? For y'all civilians, all right? So think for a moment. What attracted you to apply to that first civil service position? You civilians, all right? What attracted you to apply for your first civil service position? So here we go. Let's see what y'all got to say. For me, like I said, I was working at Maxwell, and my wife PCS to Aviano to be the elementary school principal there. So I followed her. I'm a retired chief. I'm following her around now. So, so my reason was because of my spouse moving. Right. So job security, follow the spouse. Gene, the same way. Stability, benefits, continued service in the Air Force. Good, Daniel. I'm sorry, Jason. Security, benefits, better pay as your prison job. Okay, opportunity, job security, benefits. Right, job security. If they quit furloughing us, right? Stability, job, good benefits, opportunity, benefits. You was working as a contractor and the contract ended. Yeah, Sam, I'm always afraid of that too sometime if they decide to end our contract. I hope not, though. Benefits, salary, job security, and time off. Yeah. Like I said, I became a GS employee because my wife PCS'd. Plus, also, I had heard, in Italy, it's against the SOFA agreement to have a home-based business. So I was misinformed that when I PCS'd from, when we PCS'd from Maxwell to Aviano, that I couldn't do this job anymore since I do it from home. And so I resigned from this company that I work with now. And when we went to Aviano, I became a GS employee. Like I said, during the orientation, I worked at the Ed Center. Then I moved over to the Area and Family Readiness Center. While we were there, I found out that, wait a minute, I have a CAT card. I'm an Air Force contractor. Right? I don't have a home-based business. I work for the Air Force, as a contractor from my home. And I found out later that I could have continued doing this job. I didn't have to be a GS employee. But I really valued my GS experience because it gave me more insight in teaching this course, actually. Right? Whereas the MPMC, I got all my military experience I can draw from. This stuff here, I can draw from experience from being that GS employee. Yeah, Michael, I see you got your hand up. What you got? I see you got a question. All right? Feel free, ask your question. Michael, I see you got your hand up. So unless you hit the wrong button by mistake. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of your hand up there. But if you got a question, Michael, go ahead and type it in. Oh, hang on. I just hit that. Hang on. Let me get that pod back for a moment right there. So give me just a moment. Daggone, I can't believe I did that. All right, so just a moment. I got to get that back again. All right, there. Let's see. There we go. I don't know why I did that. I hit the wrong button. Our attendee list went away. All right, let me get rid of this. There we go. Let me clear everyone's status. Not clear out the chat. Not clear everybody. There we go. Anyway, so but when we moved up here, my boss says, "Hey, you're back in Germany. You want to work for the company again?" Yes, I do. All right. So I'm a contractor again, but I valued my GS time as well. But again, like Gene was saying, I followed my spouse in my particular case. All right. So when you think about that, though, the reason I asked that question is because our next area talks about attracting that right candidate, and all y'all were typing in things that drew you to your first civilian experience. So you think about, okay, this is what drew me to the job. So if I'm trying to attract a certain candidate, what type do I want to, what type am I looking for? Plus, how can I attract that right candidate and everything? So you see, you got your little items there on the slide and everything. But what I want to talk about a little bit, though, is talking about recruitment strategies a little bit, right? So when it comes to recruitment strategies and trying to get that right candidate, another question down in the chat pod for you, right? So if you'll type your answer in the chat pod for me. What are some recruitment incentives that you may be aware of out there if you're looking to hire that individual? Remember, one of those things I talked about earlier over there in the file share, one of your things that may hinder attracting the right candidate is that new tax reform laws in there, right? So we got Matthew says a sign-on bonus. Rebecca said a hiring bonus. Michael said the same thing. Which is tax? Not sure, Michael. I'm sorry, Matthew. You can download that, but I know that there's a lot of information out there. I know that household goods moving is required now, and lodging, like when you're PCSing out and you're PCSing in, lodging and so on. But I don't think the moving of the car is charged. All right, but I do know the household goods are. All right. Let's see, student loan forgiveness. Oh, good. Yeah, we got that on the military side of the house. First duty PCS costs. Okay, we're going to talk about PCS costs a little bit in just a moment. Tuition assistance. Yeah, civilians have tuition assistance now. Palace Acquire. Good. Right. Loan forgiveness. Okay. Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't for a fact. I know for a fact that it is taxed. Yeah. Yeah. So, it is taxed. Okay. So the idea is if you got questions about that, talk to your civilian person office, and you can also, like I said, you can download the tax reform thing over there. Like I said, my wife works for DODEA, and DODEA is putting out all kinds of good information out there. Let's see, bonus, various tax credits, and so on. Great, okay. Hey, someone typed in about PCS costs. Actually, you're seeing less and less of that because as budgeting is hitting it, when you look at the advertisement in USA Jobs, sometimes it will say PCS costs are not covered, which means if the individual wants to move, they're going to have to pay for it. When my son PCS from Holloman as a GS-11 to Fort Lee, Virginia, he's in the contracting career field. He became a GS-12 there. He actually had to pay for his own PCS because his position that he was moving to was not a funded PCS pay thing. So it cost him about $20,000 or so for that move for him to take place. But he said that, in the long run, it was worth it. Some individuals, it all depends on, it could be a GS level. When I was at Albiano, and like I said, at the Education Center, I was a GS-9, GS 1740. And Air Force came out with the requirement that for 1740s, you had to be a GS-11 or above to allow that to be a PCS paid move. So in other words, when I moved from the Ed Center to the Airman Family Readiness Center, they had to do basically a local hire because they couldn't PCS anyone in unless someone paid for it on their own. Well, my job sat vacant because there was the only people that were qualified to be a 1740 were those that are already there in the positions or myself, and I was already moved out of that job. I moved over to the Ed, like I said, the Airman Family Readiness Center. So after about 8 months, they pushed it up to USAFE and said, "Hey, we're getting these. We're not getting anyone on the cert list because no one's meeting the requirements and that." And so they said, "Okay, can we get a paid PCS move?" So USAFE went to Air Force, got approval to allow for a paid PCS, and they actually were able to move someone from Incirlik, Turkey, down to my old position. So my position actually sat vacant for almost a year until they could actually get someone in there because it was a non-funded PCS move. So sometimes you need to ask the questions of your staffing specialist. Hey, we're having issues trying to get people attracting the right candidates. Can we get an exception to policy to allow us to be a funded PCS move if it was initially listed as non-funded? Matthew typed in, agree that PCS reimbursement is rare regardless of grade. Yes, sometimes. So the idea is you think of trying to attract that candidate. What are some of the things you've heard about? Talk to your staffing specialist. See if you can use some of those recruitment incentives and get that right person in your job. Now, I already talked about the USA Hire assessment program that's happening through USA Jobs now. Like I said, that's over there in the file share as well, talking about the program and also the cutoff scores for those particular GS series that it actually pertains to. When it comes to making your hiring decision, right? This is where we've got our stuff together. We're gonna have our interviews. Maybe we're gonna interview folks. Maybe we're not. We'll talk about interviewing on the next slide, okay? But when we talk about deconflicting interview schedules, that could be your schedule. It could be the people you're trying to interview. If you're having a hiring panel, it could be all the other individuals on the hiring panel and so on. But trying to deconflict all kinds of schedules so we can have a good interview. Right? When it comes to protocol, right? Especially if you're having face-to-face interviews and that person is coming through the door, you might want to set the protocol in advance, especially if you've got your hiring panel right here and there'll be people on the board. It's your panel. But actually, when it comes to GS levels, they may actually outrank you. Well, if it's your panel, it doesn't matter if you're a GS 11 and they're a GS 12, it's your panel, right? So if you're having issues, maybe you want to talk to your staffing specialist, maybe get someone else on the panel, whatever it is, figure out the protocol. And if you are going to have someone come through that door and do a face-to-face interview with you all, give that person a heads up ahead of time. Hey, when you come in the door, the hiring panel will be, right at the front of the room. Just come in, address the panel, let them know if they need to say anything, whatever. And y'all who are prior military, or you all are military, you know what I'm talking about because we're used to this when we used to do like the NCO or the airman or the officer of the quarter or something. We did those types of award panels and that. Well, same thing. If we were to do a hiring panel, we want to make sure that that individual who comes in the door is okay. Not, they're going to be nervous already. We're just trying to alleviate even more of that. Of course, the most important thing is to document everything. Someone typed in earlier, and we talked about what do you believe is the most important factor, and someone typed in transparency. So that's where you got to do your documentation. Gotta. When it comes to this interviewing stuff, right? When it comes to interviewing basics, there are basically 3 types of interviews. They were in your reading. You got your exchange of information, your selection, and your ranking. Well, I like the exchange of information. You're really not hiring anybody. You're telling them about the job. They're asking about the job. We're just exchanging information back and forth. Now, some people actually use these as trying to cut down on the number of people and everything. I don't want to call it a deselection interview, but you may say they may ask questions and maybe you may get a funny feeling, whatever. And then again, your individual who's asking questions, they may say, this job's not for me. Okay. So the exchange of information is trying to help figure out, okay, who's going to go to that particular next level for the most part. Well, I like to talk about the ranking interviews before selection interview because ranking is a lot of times what our hiring panels are doing. We're racking and stacking in that. I was never a hiring authority, but I was on a ranking interviews before. When I was the chief master sergeant at CEPME, that's now called the Barnes Center. That's down there at Maxwell Gunter. We used to hire NCO Academy and the senior NCO Academy commandants all around the world. So what would happen is my boss, the colonel, was the hiring authority. But the ranking interview would be done by myself, the chief of CEPME, the Air University Command Chief, and the AETC Command Chief. We would have all these nomination packages coming from all the MAJCOMs for these chief master sergeants who would be nominated to be an academy commandant. So we would basically be racking and stacking these individuals. Now, our ranking interview is basically just paper only, right? So we would be racking and stacking, and normally we would take, if we had 12 people nominated, we would give the colonel the top 3. And then the commander would actually do the selection interview, the hiring authority. Whether the commander did these interviews over the telephone, whether the commander did these over Skype or whatever the case is, maybe Adobe Connect, or maybe the commander decided not to actually physically interview everybody, but our commander did, right? And then the commander would actually make that selection. Now, when you rack and stack as a part of your ranking interview, it's possible that you could give your hiring authority, hey, boss, this is our number 1, our number 2, our number 3. And then once your boss starts doing the selection interviews, your boss could say, or you, if you're the hiring authority, you may say, no, I really appreciate the top 3 that you gave me. Now, when I interview these individuals, I'm going to judge them on my own as well. And I have seen where we told the commander, this is our number 1, 2, and 3, but after the actual interview, the commander ended up hiring the number 3 person, because there was a time where the number 1 person, and I sat in and was listening to it, our number 1 person in the rack and stack via paper, when it came to the interview person to person, the impression was given by that Chief Master Sergeant of, I am doing you a favor if you hire me, okay? So that individual did not interview very well at all, and really the commander was put off by it. I don't blame him, okay? But the individual that we had ranked number 3 based on paper only interviewed fantastic, and they hit off with the commander and everything, and that was who the commander hired. Of course, the commander vetted it then through the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, right, to get the chief's okay. Chief was cool with it, right? And so that's how basically your 3 types of interviews work: exchange of information, racking and stacking, which is your ranking, and your selection where you're making that's who you're going to hire or not hire. Right? Now let's talk about this main second bullet right there. Now remember what I said at the beginning. We're going to mainly talk main Air Force requirements. So this very next thing I'm going to say is for everybody. Okay, you can only interview candidates or officially referred unless you're in one of those test programs and you're being allowed to direct hire and you're not getting a cert list, okay? Again, other than that, right, you're going to get a cert list. You can only interview individuals that are on that cert list, right? Now, look at that next bullet right here. This can vary from installation to installation based on requirements. Could be career field requirements, installation, or MAGCOM. But for the Air Force, that first bullet under the the first small bullet, where it says, managers may interview none, some, or all. Okay, that's the Air Force requirement. You can interview all of them, you can interview some of them, or you don't have to interview any of them. You can make your decisions based on the paperwork that you have in front of you. That's Air Force. You may have more stringent requirements than that, where you have to do interviews or whatever it is. You notice the next one talked about asking questions. Maybe you have the opportunity, if you're going to ask questions, that you have the opportunity to develop your own questions. If you do, you want to be as consistent as possible, so you make sure that everyone gets asked the same questions if you're going to interview them. Some installations have it set up where you are not allowed to write your own questions. Some of you may get canned questions from your civilian personnel office, and these are the questions you have to ask whether you like it or not. Some installations may have it that we're not allowed to ask questions. We're only allowed to just hire off stuff. Again, it all can come down to your local requirements. This is where your local subject matter expert can be there to actually help you, all right? So when it comes to your interviews, so look at these things right here. These are some illegal, prohibited topics that you need to stay away from, all right? You need to stay away from. And you may look at some of these and say, age, citizenship, marital, education. Why can't I ask about education? I like education. I'm an education and training guy. That's what I did most of my Air Force career. I'm pro-education. That's because of the vetting process. Let's take, for example, the job says individual must have a bachelor's degree to apply for this particular job, right? Or to be eligible for this job, right? Well, if the individual has an associate's degree, they're not going to be referred to you. If they don't have their bachelor's degree, they're not going to be referred to you. You may say, well, okay, that's great, but I'm really I like master's degree. I'm going to ask about their master's degree. Well, if the advertisement says a bachelor's degree is required, then you need to stay away from that asking about that master's degree. I mean, you may say, well, but I want them to, I want to see if they've got initiative. I want to see if they are thinking about getting a master's, sometime in the future or whatever. If they get hired, then you can ask them about that. But during the hiring process, remember, you look at that ad, and the ad says a bachelor's degree is required. Now, if the ad says master's degree is desired, then it's fair game. You can ask them about it, right? But if it says nothing about a master's degree, then you got to stay away from it. Because if you go and you don't hire that individual, watch it. They find out that you hired, they didn't get hired. All of a sudden, they could file a grievance and say, I don't think I got hired because I wasn't working on a master's degree. But when I look at the ad, it didn't say anything about a master's degree. So you got to be very, very careful. And that's where your subject matter, that staffing specialist, your subject matter expert is there to help you try and keep you out of trouble, right? To make sure that if you've got questions, run them through if you're going to ask questions, run it through that person first. Say, hey, can we talk about this, or this? And they'll tell you flat out. If you want to ask about, if you say, hey, I want to ask about their master's degree, they'll look at the ad. If it talks about, nope, only bachelor's, you can't touch it. Can't touch it. I see I got a couple, Matthew, I see you trying to type in, but then it disappears. You got your hand up. I don't see a question coming in there, Matthew. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of your hand up, but I see you got your hand up. So if you got a question, Matthew, go ahead and type it in. All right. So let me clear that hand up there for you. Anyway, so just some things to try and stay away from. Remember, they are vetted before they get to you. 99.9% of the time. Yeah, every now and then someone will sneak in, and that's where you look at your cert list, you look at their qualifications. If they don't meet the qualifications, and quite naturally, you're not going to hire that individual. Now, there are certain things to take into consideration. Some people talk about, what about veterans' preferences and stuff like that. Again, talk to your MAGCOMs because there may be different requirements on that. Just like here in USAFE, right? When it comes to USAFE, the way USAFE looks at it is this is the hiring preferences in USAFE. First preference is a spouse, military spouse. Second preference is military family member, military or civilian family member. Let me put it that way. Then the third preference is veteran. And the reason USAFE does it that way is because they say, the spouse wouldn't be here if their military spouse didn't have to PCS here. So, it's inconvenient for that spouse to come, so we're going to give them first priority. Then they say, well, the family is involved with that as well, so that's where, are you allowed to ask for a transfer from the school? Normally, Matthew, what would happen is if the transcripts are required within the ad, it will say that if education is a requirement for the particular job, they have to provide their transcripts as a part of one of the attachments that goes down to USA Jobs. So if the transcript is required, it will already be coming to you. If it's not required, you won't see it, and something you should stay away from. Okay, you're welcome. And then, like I said, and then here in USAFE, the veteran actually has third preference. Right? So again, you can talk to your hiring specialist about that. Some other things to try and stay away from are topics or talking about personal plans, participation in activities. What political affiliation are you? Are you an Alabama fan or an Auburn fan? I know I tease when I say that, but trust me, in Alabama, it's a big question. People grow up thinking about that. But the idea is try and keep everything as professional as possible, all right? So when it comes to some considerations to keep your interview as productive as possible, you see these here on the screen and so on. Try and if you're going to interview people, try your best to use the same method as possible. But that's not always the case, especially if you interview someone who's at your local installation versus someone who's in Korea that you're looking to interview. Maybe this person over here you can interview face-to-face, but this person over here, because of their location, maybe you're going to do it by telephone or whatever. Or maybe you're just going to do that one via paper only, however it is. But try and make it as productive as possible, but always remember to document everything when it comes to your particular interview process. So again, some things to avoid. We already talked about the first bullet on the left-hand side. Staying away. Remember, unless you're in one of those exceptions where your installation, your MAGCOM is under a test program that the Air Force has approved, you can only interview individuals that are on that particular cert list. But I want to talk about the one right below that on the left-hand side for a moment, because you see all the others on the side. We've seen this happen in the past, so let me give you an example. All right. Let's take, for example, you like to hire from within, and you have a GS9 position open now, and you know that within a year you're going to have a GS11 position open up. So you say, you have a friend that is qualified for the job. So you say, hey, this job is going out on USA Jobs, and you're allowed to, to let people know that, hey, a job is going out there. Nothing wrong with that. But as I get further into this conversation, you'll see where it goes awry, though. So you tell your friend, hey, I got this 9 position coming open, so I think you could really do it. Why don't you go ahead, if you're interested, and apply for it through USA Jobs. And if you make the cert list, then I can interview you, right? Now here's where we go awry. And next year, I'll have an 11 coming open because I know a person will be leaving, right? And I like to hire from within. So if you're hired for the 9 position, a year later, once you meet your year requirement, I can then move you right into the 11 job, okay? So that's where we get into some trouble because we're making promises of promotion and selection. All right, so in other words, so here's what happens. Like I said, we've seen this happen in the past. So you hire this individual, and they're all giddy. They know that a year's going to go by, and so is going to PCS, and they're going to get promoted to a GS11, and all of a sudden, you decide to retire, or you end up moving and PCS into another job, and someone else comes in, and they're now the director, and they're now the hiring authority, and they say, I don't know what kind of deal that Don made with you, but I don't hire that way. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to advertise this GS11 job, and you can apply for it just like everybody else. And if you're on that cert list, you can interview just like everybody else. But I am hiring who I think is the most qualified individual. I'm not going to hire you just because you're here. If you vet above everybody else, then I'll hire you. And now, individual, may make the list, but the new hiring authority hires someone else for that GS11 billet. So now you have a very upset GS9 who came over here, liked doing the job, but had planned on moving into that GS11 billet based on what you told them when you were the hiring authority. So remember, so be very, very careful. We've seen that in the past, and it can really run into some hurt feelings and some bad promises and everything. So be very, very careful about that, all right? Hey, step 4, again, this is, I like to use this slide to get you to talk about your experiences, all right? So when it comes to your experiences here, let me put a question in the chat pod for you. Let me get rid of this particular area. Here we go. All right, so the question I'm going to put in the chat pod for you to get you to talk about this when it comes to the onboarding process. In other words, that individual is coming in brand new. What are some of the positives and negative experiences that you've had when you were that new employee coming in? Maybe you're new to the GS, or maybe you've been in one GS billet and now you're moving to another one over there. Type that in the chat pod. What are some of, when it comes to onboarding, someone coming into this job here, right? What are some of the positives and negatives that you've dealt with when you were onboarded? The reason I get my students to type this in is to get all these people to look at these things and say, I see, yeah, I should realize this. Some of the things that, the people I may be hiring that I may have to be dealing with and so on. So what are some of the things that you've dealt with? Kelly typed in, supervisor greeted himself, so that's a positive, right? Difference in CPO involvement, some are better, some are terrible. Okay, good, Gene. What else we got? Jason says hiring process seems to last a long time. Yeah, it really can, all right? Gives the impression of inaction and decisiveness. Yeah, we've seen some people actually, we want to hire them, but we can't tell them yet because the job offer hasn't come. We end up getting a job somewhere else, and all of a sudden here comes a job offer, and they say, sorry, I've already accepted another job, all right? Best ever was Joint Base AS. AS. I'm trying to figure out what AS is. But it's the Army Civilian Personnel Office. Okay. San Antonio. Gotcha. Okay. Positive, tour of facility. Negative, training was not relative to the job position. Okay. Michelle said the hiring process took forever. Right? Positive, introduced me to everybody. Negative, attitudes of the co-workers. Oh, negative attitudes. Okay. Employee, certain organization, they handed me a regulation, told me to read it versus doing the paper onboarding. Well, that's rough. Right? Hiring process is lengthy. No one's typed in yet, so I'm going to say it. Trying to get computer access, knowing that it's going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month sometimes, or whatever, to be able to use a computer. because we're trying to get the CAC card. We're trying to get our computer training done. We're trying to get that email address approved through our comm folks and that. Even if the person's already been at this base, if they're going from a contractor to a GS job, that's a whole new email address and that. And sometimes waiting can be a real bummer. So the software access took forever. Yeah, right? So on. So the idea is these things that we're typing in and these negatives that you've had to deal with, remember that when we go to bring someone on board and try and counteract that the best that we can. If we know it's going to take 3 weeks before they can use their computer or some other things, and this is a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer this, but just think about the processes and things that we can do as work center supervisors or their supervisor to try and get them involved in other ways until they can actually use their computer, so that they don't feel like they're sitting there just twiddling their thumbs the whole time and getting frustrated like you all were typing in that you all were in that. Yeah, being told my resume had a typo. Oh, James, I know. I hate those things, right? Security clearances, yeah, and so on. So, yeah, so the idea, let's see. Michael says my supervisor had me create a presentation of things to help in onboarding right after I got hired. Then he used it for the next guy. Good, yeah, because you were, that was all fresh right in your mind in that. So the idea is we want to make sure the hiring process is good and successful. We want it to be, good for everybody is really what we want to do, all right? All right, so let's talk about this small group discussion a little bit. Now, this is where I would actually break you into groups for a few minutes, have you work on different things, talking about different hiring scenarios, and all of our scenarios are true scenarios. All right, so what we would do is as I go forward on the slide, it says small group activity. So just give you an example. We're going to try this in a future. We're not going to do it today because we're still having our fingers crossed for Adobe Connect. But we'll see how the class goes over this week and next week to see if we're going to break into groups in week 3. Okay. So what would normally happen is Adobe Connect would now break you into groups. The whole screens would change up, and Adobe Connect would put you into groups. I got 26 people in the classroom. So that means we'd have about 5 to 6 people in each little group. Now, each little group would have their own little hiring scenario, is what they would, hiring staffing type scenario. And then they would brainstorm that scenario in their own little chat pods, okay? And then we'd have one little group leader in that particular group. We'd have 5 groups. And then when we come back together into the classroom, that one group leader would actually just present through notes, what their group came up with, right? Is what we'd basically do. As you see right there, I'd have given you 10 minutes to do it, and the rest of the time to talk, and then we'd be finished. But we're going to do it here. We're going to brainstorm it, right? This is what the groups, if you follow on the slide right now, says group room setup. This is what your groups will look like. To give you an idea for week 3 as well. So you see at the very top of the screen is where your own group's little chat pod would be. The group leader would use the one there on the right below that to summarize what the group came up with, and then the group scenario is what you see on the right hand side and different questions to take into consideration. It gives you an idea what we plan to do in group 3. We hope to do in week 3 as well. But I'm not going to test it today. Things are going too good. I'm going to play the law of averages. What I'm going to change the screen up a little bit. So give me just a moment. The screen's changing on you now. So now we're at the point to where you all would have broken into groups, and on your bottom right-hand side of the screen is where your group leader would have summarized, okay, what your group came up with. So let's look at a couple of these scenarios. Now, those of y'all who are on the telephone only, these scenarios are not included in your slides because these are in the breakout session, we might say. So I'm going to actually read the scenario to you. We're going to look at a couple of these scenarios just to give you an idea. So let's look at this first one for group 1 here. All right, so let's follow along. Those of y'all who are in the classroom, those of y'all on the phone, you just listen along, all right? When you took over supervisory duties 6 months ago, the first thing that you noticed was the obvious divisive nature of the organization. There's no sense of teamwork, and now despite your best efforts, there are some strong cliques and an us versus them type atmosphere. Now, the work is getting done, but operations could certainly be smoother if everyone would just cooperate. Okay? You recently hired a new employee for your work center. Although the position is not a supervisory one, right, it is a key fill for your department. You are eager for her to arrive and begin working. However, you have some concerns, not so much with your new hire, but rather your current employees. All right? So let's look at these questions that you see on the slide where they're in blue. One says like, how do you plan on shaping your arrival? Would you mention the perception of the work environment? And what's your plan of action? Let's talk about this for a moment. So you're this work center supervisor, right? So first off, you're getting ready to bring her in. She's PCSing into you from another base. Are you going to tell her about this? If you are going to tell her about it, how are you going to word it? Type it in the chat pod for me. What are some of the things that you're going to do to prepare for her arrival as it pertains to her? Let's talk about her first. What are you going to do to prepare her? Nothing. What are you going to tell her? Are you not tell her nothing? Whatever the case is. What do you got going on right there? Right? So type that in the chat pod for me. What you got going on for her? Right? I don't have anyone typing in yet. Oh, there we go. Now I got people typing in. While you type in, I'm going to take a sip of my soda. All right. Got multiple attendees typing. That's good, right? That's good. All right. Then, let's see. You would let her draw her own conclusions. Okay. So, in other words, you wouldn't give her any heads up. You don't want to muddy the waters. In other words, you let her draw her own conclusions, Kelly says. Matthew said he'd be transparent, but in generalities. Maybe not throw out any particulars under the bus, but keep it professional. Okay, good. Gene says one-on-one orientation. Talk about organization dynamics. Okay. William says that let her make her own assumptions and try and guide her in the right directions. Clarify, define expectations. Let her know what the expectations are within my area. Good. Speak of her personally. See what her perspective and goals are. Good. Meet and greet among employees. Make her aware of the shop culture and so on. Great. Okay, let's talk about your current employees. All right. Now, these are the ones you have concerns about. There's already that us and them versus atmosphere there. So what are you going to talk to your current employees about with this new hire coming in? What would you be talking to them about? You just let the things flow as is, or what you got to do? You're kind of new to the position yourself. You'd guide the employees current direction she should go with the situation. Okay, right? Dedicate one person to help getting around and meet and greets. Okay, right? But what about your employees that they're already there that are kind of like, I don't know if they're disgruntled or whatever, but they've got the ones that got all the us versus them type stuff. So we got one or multiple conversations with employees as a group, one-on-one. Large issue here with the culture. Okay, right? So I don't see anyone typing. Me personally, I would have a sit down with my current employees and say, hey, this is what I perceive. Perception is everything, right? And I perceive. I'm not putting any blame or anything here, but things are just not working here. In a good team environment, and we need to work together as a team. We got a new person coming in. We want this to be positive from the get-go. We need to work together. Whatever the case is. Let's see. Chad went on to say discussion with the employees, talking about the situation, expectations. Jason said you will need to talk about the cultures with the current employees. Right. Maybe discussions with key employees, ringleaders. Good. Honest about the environment, enforce. Gene says it sounds like his office. Sorry, Gene. Okay. Get with it. Find your SME in your shop. Right. This will help. I need this while she's here. We all need to be working together better. That's exactly correct. So good examples right there. Good examples. Hey, let's look at the second one here. All right. Let's look at the second one. All right. So here we go. Within your work center, you have a first-level supervisory position, which is currently vacant. The position has had a high turnover rate with 5 people in the position in the last 4 years. Okay? You are also fairly new to your position, so you don't have a great deal of personal history in the work center yet. What you know is that you need this position filled with someone who can produce and hopefully will stay in the position for a while. Right? So you got this high turnover position. It's a supervisory job, first level supervisory job, high turnover. You're trying to hire someone, but you want them to stay. What are some of the things that you would do here? You said like, what's your first step? What type of information do you need? Are there any partnerships you should pursue? And what's your strategic plan to try and do in this? So Christopher typed in, and also Daniel, what's causing the turnover? Right. Talk to past supervisors. Find out why they left. Okay. Get some background information, why people are leaving. Start off identifying the issue. Right. The root cause. Why are these people leaving? Could it be that they're using this position as a let me get in, get my feet wet, get into as a jump off position, so now I can go off and do something else. Maybe they're doing that. Maybe the position is a lower GS level than it really should be. So that's where you can look at the position, look at the position description. Maybe there's too much to the position. Maybe not enough. Whatever it is. Continuing on, background could be the problem here. Right? Yeah. Baxter, a stepping stone. That's what I was saying there as well. Be honest about high turnover, where the candidates make sure they want the position. Good. I used to see this at an education center when we had what was called the enlisted promotion testing position. Not only that, people who were taking language tests for FLP pay, foreign language pay, and that the test control officer position. It was actually a GS5 billet, I believe. It wasn't a supervisory billet, but it was a high vis, very important billet, but it was only a GS5. So people were coming in, getting all kinds of training that it takes to do this particular job, and then they would have their year in, and boom, they'd be gone to go be a GS7 somewhere, because the job had so much responsibility that it was a stepping stone. So eventually we had an education officer came in and said, did the paperwork at and got it bumped up to a GS7 instead of a GS5. And lo and behold, we still had people moving on, but not the stepping stone like it used to be. As soon as they meet their year, boom, they were gone. So all it took was just upgrading the position in that, right? Yeah, do they bounce around? Exactly correct. Hey, let's look at another one. Let's look at one more. All right. All right, you've narrowed down your list of candidates for a position to within your flight to 5 highly qualified members. All the candidates are internal Air Force civilian employees already. Okay, that's good. However, 3 of them are currently assigned to other bases around the world. All right. 2 of the candidates are local, with 1 of them working in another flight within your organization. The other worker is a shift worker within an organization on the other side of the base. All right. So you got 3 people that are somewhere else. Of the two people that are local, 1 is within your flight, but the other is in another squadron on base. All right. You will not be able to conduct personal interviews with any of the candidates except for the one that's in your own squadron, okay, your own organization. So, what would you do to proceed with the interviews? How do you assure equitable hiring processes and so on? What's your game plan? So what are you going to do? You got these 5 individuals that you're going to be looking at. You can interview 1. What do you do with these other 4? What you going to do? All right? Let's see. James says he's going to do phone interviews for all. Okay. Even 1 local. If I'm do these over the phone, I'm gonna do this one over the phone too. Yep, feel free, right? And Rebecca said the same thing, and John said the same thing. Gene said the same thing. Alberto's gonna do Skype interviews, okay? Michelle's gonna do phone interviews for all. You can interview via other means other than face-to-face. Sure, you could, right? Refer them to other supervisors, possibly phone interviews. Hey, remember what we said in our slides. Air Force requirements. You can interview all, none, or some. Okay? So you don't have to, by Air Force requirements, you don't have to interview all 5. You're more than welcome to. Right? But remember, you may have other requirements out there, more stringent requirements. And if you've got more stringent requirements, you got to go by those requirements. And if your requirements are you must interview all of them, then yes, you have no ifs, ands, or buts in that case. All right. Skype in a skiff, not. I know, Gene. Yeah, that ain't happening in a skiff, that's for sure. Phone for all, phone for, and so on. Yeah. So the idea is whatever meets your requirements. Again, you can talk to your local subject matter experts. Find out if there are some local requirements that you must go by. If they say nope, we have no stringent requirements here, you can do this how you see fit, and it's really up to your own desire as to how you actually interview these individuals, all, none, or some, however that particular works. Okay. All right, Michael typed in, give them the same interview questions. Good. Wesley typed in, you should already know what you're getting with the one in your area already. Yeah, you should, right? Unless the individual is not known, but normally that's not the case. You hear people through the grapevine and that. Good. All right. Hey, I'm going to go back to the main classroom. Y'all did really good on those 3 scenarios. We would have done 5, but we'll just do 3 today. All right, we'll just do 3 today. All right, let's get back to our main classroom. So I really appreciate that. So it gives you an idea when we get into week 3. Now, next week in week 2, it's already definitely set up that we do brainstorming again. Week 3, if everything's working well through Adobe Connect and that, then we'll break into groups, and it gives you an idea of how we would actually do that in week 3. All right. All right, so let's do our summary for today, because basically that is it. All right. So we talked about the hiring processes. Like I said during the orientation, we do not cover everything here in our webinars that you've had within Canvas. Right? We just hit on some big rocks in that, and our big rocks today were steps in the hiring process. We looked at some basics of interviewing and selection. We talked about some prohibited practices to stay away from to try and keep you out of trouble. And I used you, right, with your personal experiences when it came to onboarding, to try and make sure that we try and make that onboarding experience as positive as possible, for everyone involved. All right. So just remember, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I'll mention here at the end, your local subject matter expert is that staffing specialist at the civilian personnel section, civilian personnel office, HR, whatever you call it, where you're located. Use and abuse that individual. That's what they are there for. All right. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? No questions. Got questions? Feel free to type in. All right. Hey, my last slide for you today is this. All right. Pre-assessment. I think I've got on this one, I've only got one individual yet who has not completed their pre-assessment. I sent that individual a note today. And those of y'all who are here in this classroom today, it's not you. So all y'all that are there on that list right there, y'all are good. Except for Gene, I don't know. You're not in my webinar. I mean, you're not on my roster, so I don't know. Gene, you deal with that with your particular with your instructor. But for all of my students that are in this class today, you're good. All right, Gene. All y'all are good, and thank you for doing that. All right, remember, that was no pass, no fail. Didn't matter if you scored a 10 or a 90. All right? Remember, all your other coursework, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 progress checks, and you're also your final test, they're not due to be completed until the course ends on Monday, May 6th. All right? We don't harp on, hey, this is week 1, you got to do your progress check 1. Next week is week 2, you got to do progress check 2. No, we don't play that game. All right? Some people are doing it week by week. Some people, looking at my list right here, they've already gone through other weeks. Like I said, you are allowed to work ahead, all right? Especially if you're going to be gone the last week or the last couple of weeks of the class. You want to make sure you complete all your requirements, all right? So your progress checks, remember, you can do them in the final test, up until the end of the course. Your feedback, though, that's the one that we did ask you that, when you're in Canvas, you come to that feedback page for that particular week. And we ask you to wait until after the webinar because your feedback is going to ask you about the webinar, right? So if you have not completed your week 1 feedback yet, feel free, now that we're finished with our webinar, to go in, give us some feedback, what you thought about your week 1 module work and what you thought about your week 1 module and so on. Don't worry, James, don't worry about it. Someone asked me, they said, hey, I wasn't here for the orientation, and how do I need to let you know that I watched the orientation? I don't track the orientation for attendance and that. We just make sure you get your pre-assessment done. Now remember, for those of you all who may be viewing this as the recording, so those of you all who are here and those of you all who are on the telephone right now, this does not pertain to you. But those of you all who are viewing this as the recording, don't forget, when I send out the link and you get the link, look at the directions, because now you owe me that little written assignment where you need to respond to these poll pods, and also that little scenario that was in your instructions, okay? So that only pertains to the individuals that are viewing this week 1 as a recording, all right? Anyway, but so that was that there. Next week, we get into week 2, right? And we'll be, that'll be on April 16th. Of course, it'll be at 9:30 Central Time. Adjust your time zone accordingly. Oh, hang on, got another person. Let's see. Someone says on the 23rd, it's scheduled another class. I have to watch the video. That's okay. Yep. If you can't be here during one of my sessions, we have other sessions like on other Tuesday sessions, other Wednesday sessions, and other Thursday sessions where you can attend with another instructor. Just like Gene is with us today. Gene, his instructor is actually Lynetta, but he's here with us today because this time worked for him better this particular week. If you can't be in one of my webinars on Tuesday at 09:30 Central because you have a meeting or whatever, contact me if you can attend later on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday that particular week, and I'll let you know the times. And if you let me know a time that works for you, I can then give you the link to that particular instructor, right? And you can attend their particular webinar that week. That doesn't work for you? Hey, I'll send out the recordings. Matter of fact, the recording today will go out in about 2 hours, all right? So that's your choices. We try and make it as easy as possible for you, you might say. All right? Cool. All right, Brad. All right, so anyway, so that's it for me. So what I'm going to do is, you got questions, feel free to type them in. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to leave you with a song by the Police called There Are Voices in My Head. Where are they coming from? All right, go ahead and stop the recording.